Away from Israel-Hamas war, let's now bring you updates on Russia and Ukraine war. At least 6 people have been injured and power cut in several central and western regions of Ukraine in fresh attacks by Ukrainian forces. Russian missile and drone attacks overnight damaged Ukrainian thermal and hydropower plants early on Friday. Meanwhile, new documents suggest that Russian President Vladimir Putin had advanced knowledge that a terror event in Russia was imminent, and that's just before the Moscow concert hall attack. We have more details in this report.
The Kremlin security services were aware of an ISIS threat day before a deadly attack on a concert hall near Moscow, Russian intelligence documents has shown. At least 143 people were killed last Friday in the deadliest attack on Russia in decades, where assailants stormed Crocus City Hall with guns and incendiary devices just before a concert was to be held. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack with statements, photos and a propaganda video filmed by the attackers. The Dossier Center is a Russian investigation group backed by an exiled former Russian tycoon turned Kremlin critic. A few days before the terrorist attack, members of the Security Council received a warning that Tajik citizens could be used in terrorist attacks on Russian territory. Shocking footage of the attack showed how victims fled for their lives and ducked to safety in horror, with the venue transformed into an inferno. 4 suspects were from the Central Asian Republic of Tajikistan, but worked in Russian temporary or expired visas, appeared in court earlier this week facing terror charges, showing visible signs of injury. 3 pleaded guilty. Despite relations between Washington and Moscow being at historic lows, the United States warned Russia that ISIS militants were planning to stage an attack in the country. Earlier in March, the U.S. Embassy warned of an increased threat of terror attacks in Russia, with National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson saying the U.S. had shared this information with Russian authorities under the duty to warn policy. Former Russian lawmaker and exiled Kremlin critic said the latest evidence posed serious questions for the Russian leadership and its security forces. Russian missile and drone attacks overnight damaged the Ukrainian thermal and hydropower plant. There were emergency shutdowns in the southeastern region. Poland scrambled planes as Ukraine came under missile attack on Friday morning, the Polish Defense Force said. The operational command said Polish and Allied aircrafts were activated due to intense activity of long-range aviation of the Russian Federation related to missile strikes against targets in Ukraine. Ukraine's Prime Minister says Kyiv has received a $1.5 billion tranche of funding under a World Bank program. Ukraine's Prime Minister says Kyiv has received a $1.5 billion tranche of funding under a World Bank program. He said on X that $984 million comes from Japan and $516 million. The funds will cover budget spending for social and humanitarian needs and reconstruction.